Hey, I'm Stephanie, and today I'm going to show you around my makeup collection. If there's a certain aspect of it you're interested in, I always use timestamps so you can easily jump to whatever you want. Now, I am fully aware that I have way more makeup than any one person needs, and I've spent the last couple of years dramatically reducing my consumption habits and doing thoughtful declutters. For example, my Panning for Gold series here on YouTube, which I'll link below. And now I've decided to take it a step further. I'm going to use the container concept to try to organically limit my purchases. I organized my makeup in my very makeshift space in a way that makes sense for me. I don't have a dedicated beauty room or a traditional vanity or even those IKEA drawers that every beauty YouTuber seems to have. You'll see, but it works for me with what I have, and that's what's important. And now that I've set it up so that every item and every category has its own home, the containers I chose are my limit. My makeup is not allowed to expand beyond the borders of the designated containers that I put it in, whether that be a drawer, a box, or a case. The one thing I won't be showing you today is where I store my singles palettes, because the palettes that I use to store them are just too large to fit in any of my drawers, so they live in a separate closet. And it is, if you've ever seen Friends, my Monica closet, and no one's gonna get a tour of that. But I can start off by showing you what's in these individual palettes, especially because I think it's a good, simple visual representation of what I mean by the container concept. So for example, this is my one and only palette of neutral single shadows. I can put as many neutral single shadows in here as I want to. I can fill up the whole thing, but once it is comfortably full, then I can't put any more in here. As you can see, I still have a couple of empty slots in here. I'm not planning on filling them, but I can if I need to. The story's a little different when it comes to my palette of colorful singles. As we can see, this one is completely full. And because the container that is designated for my colorful shadows is full, that means by default, I am on a no-buy when it comes to colorful singles. The last palette I store in my closet is my Clionadh Multichromes. I find that these are very fragile and they have to lay flat. And because I can't store them upright like all of my other palettes, it makes it difficult for me to store these in my drawers, which is why this goes in my closet as well. But we could take a quick look at it and you can see there is one empty spot in here. So technically I could buy one more Clionadh shadow if I really felt the need to. But just because I have an empty spot doesn't mean I feel the need to fill it, because emptiness can be really helpful. For example, it can give me quicker access, easier access to the shadows in here. But enough chit chat. Let's get to the tour. Welcome to my she shed, aka the part of my office that I use to get ready for shows and videos. I have never been big into buying home goods because I don't really spend all that much time at home. So I don't have a fancy place and I didn't buy anything new to organize my makeup. I just used stuff I already had. For example, I took this nightstand and I repurposed it as a vanity. And I took this old mirror that broke during my last move and I covered the broken part at the bottom with the nightstand and then added some USB lights so that I can see what I'm doing when I get ready. This mirror here has been a great addition to my setup because it has an adjustable light. I can change the color temperature and I can also change the brightness, and it has a 5 times and a 10 times magnifying mirror in addition to a normal mirror. So I can see all the nooks and crannies of my face as I get older and my eyesight needs an extra boost. But it's also great for me because it doubles as a phone stand, and this is how I film all of my makeup application shots for my videos. As you can clearly see, I have way too many makeup brushes, literally over 30 years worth of makeup brushes because I have never decluttered them before. I will be doing a brush declutter soon though, because if I don't, they will literally crush me. So if you'd like to see that, make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. This little box here is filled with my foundations and concealers and some other things that I might use day to day, even if I'm not wearing makeup like my sunscreen. This container is where I put my dirty brushes once I've used them. Then I can just bring this container into the bathroom or the kitchen to clean them all up. We'll open the drawers when we get to the actual makeup section of the video. But down here is my notebook. Back when I did project panning, this was where I documented all of my product usage. But now I just pretty much use it to write down the makeup that I apply while I'm getting ready for a video so that I can put that information in my show notes. And sometimes people want to know what I'm wearing in my videos. So if you're ever curious as to something I've talked about or something that I'm wearing, you can always check there because I usually have the info listed. Next to it, I have a pencil organizer, but we'll take a closer look at that when we get into actually going through my collection. And this little stand here has all of the general knickknacks I use when I'm getting ready. So I have a variety of hairbrushes and combs for different purposes, some primers, some hair oils and styling creams, my micellar water and makeup remover, some setting sprays, and some of my skincare devices. On the other side of my get ready chair, I have this big box that I use to store fabric for crafting projects. And since I don't have to get into it all that often, I mostly just use it as a shelf. So I added this light here because it adds some nice ambient lighting for my makeup application footage. This here is a vintage hand mirror that was passed down to me from my mom. Behind it is my lipstick container. And this extra mirror is just a smaller, more portable version of the bigger mirror I have on my nightstand. This one is great for travel because it's cordless and it comes apart for easy packing, but I mostly have it because I need to see when I'm recording application footage, and my other mirror is used as a phone stand. And this here is a travel suitcase that contains the rest of my makeup. The fact that it's on wheels is really convenient because I can bring it over to my vanity to get ready or to my desk for reference when I'm recording videos. Now that you've seen my beauty corner, let's get into the makeup. The top of this case opens up. There's a removable bag at the top, and I keep spare beauty tools in here, like some backup beauty sponges and eyelash curler pads, that kind of thing. In the bottom section, I store my travel atomizers, which I can use to make a travel bottle of any of my fragrances. Here are a couple of lip scrubs if my lips need any exfoliating. And this little section here is for spirit gum, which I use every once in a while as an adhesive, and some Inglot Duraline, which I can use to rehydrate products that are drying out or to make a liquid product out of powders. My cream cheek products live over here. This Makeup Forever case has been mostly repurposed at this point. Only 3 of the blushes in here are originally from the Makeup Forever palette. I depotted the rest of them and gave them away because I had cream blushes in other colors that worked better for me. So this one is actually Makeup by Mario's Petal Blush. This coral shade is from Tom Ford, and these 3 are the original Makeup Forever blushes, while this one is from Estee Lauder. There used to be a bunch of foundations on this side, but they just did not work for me. So I also repotted those and gave them away and replaced them with a Tom Ford highlighter, the Patrick Ta contour cream, which is part of the Major Sculpt bronzer duo. This is MAC's cream highlighter in Hush, and a Kevin Aucoin cream highlighter. I think the shade is called Candlelight or maybe Incandescent. I don't think I recall, and I didn't write it down, unfortunately. This is my Hourglass Illume Sheer Color Trio in the Sunset colorway. It's gorgeous, but it's taking me forever to use up. My favorite product in here is the bronzer, followed by the blush. The highlighter is kind of hit or miss for me. Some days it looks great, other days it looks kind of odd. And I haven't been able to figure out why yet. So if I do manage to use up the bronzer and the blush, I will consider this done. This Bobbi Brown Pot Rouge in the shade Powder Pink has been on its last legs for so long now, which just serves as a reminder of how long it actually takes to use up products like this. It looked like it was almost gone, but then I scraped the product out from the edges and pressed it all into the middle, and I can see that there's still a ton of uses left here. This is actually a lovely shade for me, particularly in the summer. I am actually debating whether or not I should declutter this one. It's actually a Lisa Eldridge lipstick in the shade Velvet Muse. One day I went to use the lipstick and the whole thing just fell out of the component. I tried pressing it back into its container, but it just did not want to stick. So instead I smushed it into this empty compact I had, and I have been using it ever since as a cream blush. It is a really nice color, also as a cream blush. It works really well, but I find that I don't use it very much because when I blend it out the way I do with all of my other cream blushes, the color looks very different than it does in the pan. It looks like it's going to be a mauve-y pink color, but it blends out to a much warmer, peachier pink color, at least on my cheeks. So even though the formula works well that way and it's ultimately a pretty color, I never end up happy with the final result because I'm always expecting something different. You'd think I would have learned by now, but for some reason, I just can't get my head around it in this case. I could continue using it like this as a lipstick, and I could just get a lipstick brush out and put it on that way, but honestly, I never think to do that because my bullet lipsticks are just so much more convenient. What do you think I should do? This little compact is the never-ending product. It is the Energizer Bunny of my makeup collection. It keeps going and going and going, and it's great because I really do enjoy it. Most people who talk about this product completely ignore the highlighter, but I think it might have actually become my favorite part of the whole duo. It's just a clear balm, but it adds a gentle, smooth glisten to the skin without being sticky. For someone who really enjoys subtle makeup, it's great. The bronzer is also wonderful. I just have to use it with a lighter hand in the winter, but in the summer, I can really pack it on, and it's a great shade for me. I have it in Intensity 1. Over here is where I keep all of my lip balms and glosses. My sunscreen lippies are here, my normal balms and glosses are here, and stick gloss and bullet lip balm is here. I honestly had to go through all my pockets and bags before this video because these are the types of lippies that I most frequently take with me when I'm running out the door. These sunscreens will get a lot more use in the summer. This Lanolips gloss is a great option for the winter because it's a thicker, more nourishing formula. I'm always glad to have it with me on bitterly cold, windy days. This Lancome gloss, on the other hand, I'm not quite sure about. It looks beautiful. It works wonderfully. I don't have any complaints, but I just find that I very rarely reach for a clear gloss because when I want to add shine, I'll normally opt for a very nourishing balm. And this one doesn't dry my lips out, but it also doesn't necessarily feel all that nourishing either. Maybe I'll give it a few more months, and if I'm still not using it, I'll see if my mother would like it. This Gucci lip balm is almost gone. I always called this my luxury chapstick because it was so easy and comfortable to wear. Now that the end is near, I'm wondering if I'd like to replace it with the same thing or if I want to try something new. I think I might try something new since I got this as a Christmas gift from my parents 2 years ago, which means I've been enjoying it for a while and a change might be nice. I really did like having a hoity-toity lip balm. Every time I took it out of my bag, I felt so fancy. So maybe I'll try another luxury formula because I find that if I have one expensive, beautiful thing, I take better care and I really treasure it and I get more joy out of it. Whereas if I buy a cheap chapstick from the grocery store, it often gets lost in my pocket or my bag, and then I can never find it. And I end up buying another one because I can't be bothered trying to find the first one. But something like this is special enough to me that it never gets lost in a bag or a pocket for long because I'm definitely willing to look for it because I'm always excited to use it. The rest of this section is dedicated to random tools, some empty compacts that I can use if I need to repot something. This stack from Melt is empty and is ready to be used for repotting things. I've got a spray bottle that's got this horribly annoying rounded bottoms that you can't stand it up, but I keep it anyway because it has such a great mister and nothing beats a great mister. And this here is an empty bottle of foundation that I would like to use to decant my Surratt foundation. I just need to finish cleaning out this bottle first. I've got a mirror compact here that I sometimes throw into a bag if I think I'll need it, and this is also where I keep my double-ended brushes. I am not sure what to do with these. On the one hand, they are great quality, and every time I use them, I'm really happy with my makeup application. On the other hand, they're really hard to store because they're double-ended, and because I keep them in here, they don't get as much use as they should, but I just don't have space to lay them down on my vanity, so I can't store them there. I'm going to have to decide if they're worth keeping when I do my brush declutter. As you can see, there's still a lot of empty space in this particular container, so there is room to grow, but I don't want to fill the space just for the sake of filling it. I want to make sure that I have time to enjoy anything I choose to bring in. And also, considering the fact that everything I store in here that's a cosmetic is a cream or a liquid, I need to be really careful because those things do expire faster than powder products, so I need to keep things under control here. The first drawer in this case is dedicated to eyeshadow palettes, and I like that this drawer is empty enough that I can easily flick through all of the palettes to quickly find what I want. The first palette in the lineup is my Lethal Cosmetics Neutrals, which my friend Zach dubbed my Bludgeoned by Beige palette, and that makes me smile every time I use it. Then I have a bunch of Natasha Denona palettes, the Original Gold palette, Biba, Trichrome, Lila, I Need a Nude, which if I could pick only one Natasha palette, this would probably be the one I would keep. I've got Bronze, I've got Yucca, and Glam. Then I have my Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge palette, which is still my go-to favorite smoky eye palette. And in the way back, we have my Viseart Grand Pro Volume 1, which has a bunch of neutral mattes inside. I'm not sure if this was actually in my palette declutter that I did last year because I think it was in my travel bag at the time, but this is not new to me. I've had this for years. It spends most of its life in my travel bag though. On the other side, I have my Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette, two small Viseart palettes, the Violette Entendu and Cashmere. And then I have what I call my stage stack. These are the original large Viseart palettes that tend to come with me on a lot of my tours. And in the way back, I have a palette of everyday singles. They're completely miscellaneous from all sorts of different brands, everything from Tom Ford to Too Faced. There's some Morphe, some Kevyn Aucoin, ZC Cosmetics, and Clionadh all in here. And last but not least, I have my Gucci palette. I ended up getting rid of the pink shadow in here. The shade that was right here was horrible. It just always looked crusty. So I mixed up my own new version of it using shadows that I already had, and I pressed it into this pan. And now every shade in the palette works for me, and I'm much happier, and it gets even more use than it did before. As far as I'm concerned, this drawer doesn't really have any space left. I mean, technically, I guess I could squeeze more into it, but then I would lose the ease of access that I really want to have when I play with my makeup. My goal with this container concept was twofold: to give me a clear visual limit to prevent me from purchasing too much, and also to make my life easier by making my makeup easier to store, to access, and to clean. And I feel like adding any more palettes to this drawer would just make that less easy. The last drawer in this case has my face palettes, my off-season foundation shades, and a luminizer that I use in the summer, and my backup powder, R.I.P. Givenchy. This side contains all of my Charlotte Tilbury palettes. One of them is just a cheek palette, but the rest of them are whole face palettes. They must not have sold well because they've all since been discontinued. Luckily, I go through my makeup so slowly that I have enough to probably last forever. I use the box in the middle as a separator, but it just holds my summer foundation and luminizer shades. So this is my summer shade of my Double Wear foundation and my summer shade of my Charlotte Tilbury luminizer. This is basically my temporary holding space for products that I'm not using right now, but will be in the near future. And the palettes on the right-hand side are miscellaneous. I have one highlighter palette. I won't be purchasing any more one product palettes in the foreseeable future because I just find I don't reach for them as much as I reach for my individual compacts or my multi-product palettes. But I do keep this one because this is the only powder highlighter formula that I have that gives me a glass skin look. I have two Hourglass palettes. One has my summer shades in it, and one has my winter shades. I have this Bobbi Brown travel palette, which has a concealer, a corrector, a foundation, a powder, and a bronzer. And this is great when I'm just traveling with a carry-on. I also have a NARS blush palette. Yes, it's another one product palette, but I keep it for two reasons. One, it helps me resist buying any future NARS palettes because I already have this gorgeous one because they come out with them all the time. And so owning this one just is a constant reminder I don't need to go out and get the new one even when it tempts me. But also, even though this palette does technically just contain blushes, the shades work as highlighters and bronzers for me too. And this last palette is a Lancome Eye and Cheek palette, which is just gorgeous and can create a beautifully soft, ethereal glow. This drawer definitely still has some space left, but not much. Right now, everything is still really easy to access, and it feels refreshing to have empty space. So this drawer also feels like it's very near its limit to me. As an aside, I am doing a nail glue test, and as you can see, I'm losing nails left and right. So please ignore them. I'm not going to put them back on because obviously this glue is not working. Let's just continue with the makeup. Next is my lipstick container, which is very clearly completely full. So I am on a lipstick no-buy by default. When I go through and I swatch these lipsticks, I feel like I have several that are very similar. So I may need to go through and do a declutter to make sure that some of these beautiful things get passed on before they can expire. But I'm going to observe how often I choose each one as I do my makeup over the next few months, and I'll revisit them later this year. Because I did just reorganize everything, I feel like it's a big experiment, and I'm not sure how the organization is going to affect how I actually use everything. Now it's time to move on to my vanity. This little container here is more for my convenience than it is for my container concept because it holds most of my skin prep and complexion products that I use all the time. So these aren't things that I'm necessarily worried about over purchasing. They're just kind of my everyday tools. My sunscreen and my matte setting primer are in here. The Idem Le Chouchou lip balm is something that I solely use for prepping my lips while I do my makeup, so I've got that in here, along with my Milani Conceal and Perfect color corrector. This is what I wear on days when I'm not wearing any other makeup because it makes my under eye circles less apparent, but it still looks really natural. I have my winter shade liquid luminizer from Auric, my winter shade of my foundation in the Estee Lauder. I'm currently using the shade Ecru, my winter shade in the Surratt foundation, which is shade 4, and I have my RCMA foundation palette, 2 concealers, and my liquid bronzer, which I also purchased to use as a foundation adjuster. I used to purchase a summer and a winter shade for all of my foundations because I'm outside all summer, and despite the fact that I wear sunscreen and protective clothing, I still tend to get pretty bronzed. But I purchased this Makeup by Mario liquid bronzer as a mixer, and it works really well with all of my foundations. I used to have trouble using up my foundation before it expired because I would have 2 bottles of each formula, but now that I have this adjuster, that solves that problem really nicely. The top drawer of my vanity stores tools like beauty sponges and powder puffs that I'd like quick access to when I'm doing my makeup, but also I keep face cloths and washable cotton rounds in here in case I need to remove some makeup or clean up a mistake. When it comes to the container in here, I just took a shipping box and cut it up to use as a container for my powders, some primers, and correctors. I've got my one size translucent powder for occasions when my face needs to stay matte all day, even under extreme conditions. My Huda powder in the shade Pound Cake is great for everyday looks when it's hot outside especially, and the Givenchy powder is perfect for every other occasion. I find that all 3 are very blurring, and their only difference is really in how long and how well and how extremely they mattify. I also have one pressed powder from Charlotte Tilbury in here too. My favorite under eye corrector from Charlotte Tilbury also lives in here, along with my green color corrector from Exa Beauty. This is my Sicily Blur Expert powder in the shade 0, which is perfect for my nose, which tends to reject foundation unless it's primed just right. I also have a sample of this Tarte Pore Filling Primer here, but I don't have any thoughts on it yet. I'm just kind of trying it out. My Hourglass Ambient Light Finishing Powder in the shade Diffused Light lives in here too, alongside this Madison Reed Root Powder that I got from my aunt. It's in the shade Light Brown, and I use it to fill in my roots when my hair is looking a bit sparse. It's basically just a big eyeshadow, but the brush is really nicely shaped for applying it to the hairline. And the final residents of this drawer are my Mothership palettes from Pat McGrath and my Vanity Cosmetics palette, since its packaging is basically the same component. I've got Midnight Sun, Subliminal, Bronze Seduction, Divine Rose, and Moonlit Seduction, and then the signature palette from Vanity Makeup. This drawer is obviously packed, so no new powders or primers or correctors or motherships can move in here. I am clearly at my limit. It looks very cluttered in here, so I might have to think about reorganizing it. But if I move the cotton rounds, it's actually pretty easy to get at everything. So I'm going to live with it for a while and see how it feels. The bottom drawer is for my color cosmetics. I cut up more shipping boxes to use as containers here too. I've got blushes and bronzers in one, highlighters, duo shadows, and single shadows in the other. This little box here is just for cream and liquid eyeshadows, and the rest of the drawer is for quints and quads and some application tools like these shadow shields and cotton swabs. I do have two very versatile larger palettes in here as well. The Danessa Myricks Groundwork Defining Neutrals palette, which I often use all over my face, and my Viseart Neutral palette, which also gets used all over my face. But if we take a closer look at each container, here I've got 9 blushes and 3 bronzers. I haven't purchased anything in these categories since before my know by year, so everything in here is at least 3.5 years old. But I know for a fact that these 2 bronzers are way older than that because I've had both of these for what feels like forever, before 2020 for sure. So my only new bronzer in here is the one from Tom Ford, the Glow Bronzer in shade 2 Terra. A friend and I traded bronzers, I think 2 years ago, because we weren't happy with the shades that we had, and this was what I got in the trade. So I'm not even sure how new this one is. It's new to me, and I'm glad to have it. The Tom Ford is my rosiest leaning bronzer and the only one with any sheen to it. The Marc Jacobs Tantastic Bronzer is pretty neutral and very lightweight, and the Hoola Benefit Bronzer is still neutral, but it's my warmest shade of the 3. There are several newer bronzers on the market that I've really wanted to try, but I just can't justify buying any when I still have 3 that work perfectly fine. They are getting up there in years, so if they start to act funny or smell weird, I am prepared to toss them, but I don't want to discard them before their time. Plus, it's not like I have a whole lot of space in my blush and bronzer container anyway, because 9 blushes are taking up the rest of the space. This one from Clinique in the shade Nude Pop has been my most used blush, and it's definitely on its last legs. I had already used it to the point where there was only a tiny bit of product at the very edges of the pan, so I scraped it out and pressed it into the center to use the rest of it up. That means that it is now very fragile. It's essentially just loose dust in the pan now, so I can't travel with it and I have to lay it flat to store it. But I'm glad I have sufficient space in the container to do that. And that's just another benefit of the container concept, making sure I have enough space for everything. My next nude blush is Cedar Rose from Lancome, which is my second most used blush since I tend to go for more nude, muted colors. This is also nice and subtle. It's a little bit more pink than Nude Pop. It also doesn't really show up on my skin all that much because it's very subtle, but it is very pretty. And my last nude-ish blush is from Patrick Ta in the shade She's So LA. I really like the brownish tone in here, especially in the summer. The rest of my blushes are all pretty darn colorful in comparison. The one underneath Nude Pop is Clinique's Ginger Pop, which looks like a hot pink coral color on me. Luckily, it does sheer out pretty easily, so it's easy for me to wear. If I ever need to brighten up my face, especially when I have a tan, a little pop of this works really nicely. But a little goes a long way with it. I don't need a whole lot, which is why it's going to take me forever to go through it. This ZC Palace Identity actually kind of does the same thing, just not quite as well, and it's a little easier to overdo this one. On my complexion, this one pulls a burnt orange color, and my main reason for keeping this has been its great staying power. My 2 Cover FX blushes in Soft Peach and Pink Dahlia are a lot more subtle, but they still look like a pop of color on me. Milani Luminoso is basically a blush lighter on me because it is so light and so glowy, but it's really pretty also as a topper. And this is NARS Exhibit A blush. A little goes a long way with this one, but if I use a light hand, I can give myself a beautiful touch of sunburn without the sun damage. Yes, there are a ton of new and beautiful blushes on the market, but I know all of these here so well that I just don't think it makes sense to distract myself with more. Plus, it's not like I have any space left in this container anyway. I am considering looking for a nice replacement of that Clinique one once it's gone though, because I'm looking for kind of a peachier, browner, nude shade. The Cedar Rose is a little bit pink, and the Patrick Ta is a little bit too extremely brown, and I'd like to find one that leans just slightly pinky peachy brown, somewhere in the middle, but something very subtle that's easy to wear. I don't feel the need to hurry though, because the Lancome blush and the Patrick Ta will do until I find something new. Moving on to the next container, storing my highlighters with my single and duo eyeshadows makes a whole lot of sense to me, especially since a lot of the highlighters can double as great lid shades. I have 5 highlighters, which is more than enough for someone like me. This first one is actually the first one I ever bought. It is Becca's Moonstone, and it is probably my most used, not only because it's my oldest, but also because of the color. The Laura Geller Baked Highlighter in French Vanilla is probably my softest highlighter and gives a very natural soft glow. So this is really nice when I'm looking for something ultra natural and soft. My Laura Mercier Matte Radiance Baked Powder Highlighter is my most ethereal option, and this one's really special. The Bobbi Brown highlighting powder in Pink Glow is by far my most sparkly option, and this Jane Iredale Powdered Gold is the most beautiful inner corner highlight. It seems very extra to have something just as an inner corner highlight, but this was a gift from my mother, and I was trying to make it work in so many different ways, as an eyeshadow, as a cheek highlighter, but every time I put this on my inner corner, I just feel like it's absolutely perfect, so I keep it just for that. This Fenty Beauty Kilowatt Foil Duo is technically a highlighter, but I use it as eyeshadow. Either shade is a great one-and-done look that I have always really liked. These 2 Bobbi Brown duos were gifts, and they are absolutely stunning. The matte baked gelée formula is so lightweight on the skin, and the sparkling shades are so dimensional and effervescent. I'm really impressed with these. The rest of the container is dedicated to my single eyeshadows. Dior Beige Mitza is such an easy, elegant, one-and-done shade that looks special in any context without ever stealing the show. The shade Industrial from the Melt Gunmetal stack might be my favorite gunmetal shade of all time because it has just enough warmth to make it really wearable for me. And then I have 2 of the Hourglass Scattered Light Glitter eyeshadows. These always look so refined. It's like grown-up glitter. I have it in the taupe shade Smoke and the pinky shade Reflect. The next container holds my cream and liquid eyeshadows. I purposely made this container really small because I want to make sure that I never own a whole lot of these at once. The reason for that is because I find that cream and liquid products expire so much faster than powder cosmetics. This Stila Shimmer and Glow eyeshadow is on its last legs. There is just a teeny tiny bit of product left at the very bottom and on the very sides. But I actually managed to use this nearly all the way up in 2 years, and it's a good thing because I got a similar product for Christmas. So I think I will probably exchange this one for that one very soon. I also have 3 matte liquid shadows. About Face's Smell Before Rain, which on me is a very light grayish color. And I have 2 Ulta Beauty shades. One is a warmer one called Game Over, which is a very light brown on me, and a cooler tone called Vintage Beauty, which looks like a very subtle kind of lavender contour on me. I also have 4 pot shadows. 2 of them are Tom Ford duos. Now, I have had these for what feels like forever, and I think this should probably be their last year with me, since this product is something that I apply so close to my eyes. But they do still smell fine, they're still performing well, so I'm not ready to get rid of them quite yet. They are lovely, but a little goes a long way for me, so I don't know that I ever would have been able to use them up, even if I had really, really tried. I have a MAC paint pot in soft ochre, which is great for use as an eyeshadow base if I need to blank out my eyelids. This is another one that potentially lasts forever. And I have one Charlotte Tilbury Cream Eyes to Mesmerize eyeshadow in the shade Exaggerize. I think this shade is exclusive to her website, but this to me is the very grown-up version of Urban Decay's Space Cowboy. It's got all the sparkle without any of the fallout, and it really makes the eyelids glisten. I used the remaining section of my drawer as my container for my Natasha Denona, Charlotte Tilbury, and Pat McGrath quads and quints, along with my one and only Clinique eyeshadow palette. My two Charlotte Tilbury palettes are the Celestial Pearl Quad and the Super Nudes. They pair really well together, but I also find they're both beautiful on their own. From Clinique, I have the Best of Black Honey, which looks like a boring palette when you just look at it in the pan. But every single time I put this on my eyes, I end up with a beautiful everyday look. From Pat McGrath, I have the Bronze Bliss palette, which is incredibly shiny and sparkly, almost blinding, and it impresses me every time I wear it to this day. And the rest of this container is dedicated to Natasha Denona. I've got the Camel Quint, plus I have the Mini Nude palette, the Mini Gold palette, the Mini Glam palette, the Mini Star palette, and the Mini Retro palette. There is absolutely no room left in this section, so no more Natasha Denona quints for me. But I've also got a bunch of quints and quads in this box that I use as a third drawer. I've got all of my Tom Ford quads here. These are the wet to dry formula. These are the more conventional matte and shimmer formulas. And the rest here are the cream formula. I also have all of my Lancome quints. If you'd like to take a closer look at them, I'll link to my quint and quad declutter because I show what all of them look like there. My very favorite YSL quad also lives here. It is 710 Ova Brune, in addition, of course, to my Beautopsy face palette and my KVD contour palette. As you can see, I do not have much room left in here at all, so I will have to be really particular with any potential purchases I want to make in this category. As you can see, I'm pretty obsessed with eyeshadow. This is the category that brings me the most joy, but I have enough to enjoy for the rest of my life. I honestly don't need to be buying anymore. When it comes to pencil style products, I like to use a book like this to store them because it's very easy to have an overview of everything. Every product has its own slot and nothing ever gets lost. This first section is where I store my lash stuff and my brow stuff. As you can see, I don't feel like I have any issues over purchasing things in these categories. I'm not even tempted to try to fill this. The gaping emptiness is actually rather refreshing. The next page tells a different story. These are my eyeliners. Although this page is much fuller, I don't think I necessarily have a problem purchasing in this category either, since about half of these were given to me. Most of them were decluttered to me from friends and family, with the exception of these, which were sent to me by the company Prime Prometics. But as I mentioned in my 25 things I'm refusing to buy in 2025 video, I won't be purchasing anything to fill any of these gaps. My goal is just to use up as much as I can this year. And the last page is lip liners. I also don't feel the need to fill any of these gaps. I feel like I have more than enough, so I will just focus on using what I have. Last but not least, we have my social media reference box. I originally started this box because I get questions about some of the things that I reviewed, and these are the things that can help me answer the questions I typically get. But they're not necessarily things that I want to use all the time, so it isn't worth keeping them with my everyday makeup. But I also ended up cheating a little bit and using this as a box for the makeup that I don't necessarily want to use every day, but it's makeup that I wanted to keep because I still do like to use it once in a while. Case in point, some of my more colorful palettes. I don't reach for color very often, so it doesn't make sense to keep a lot of colorful palettes with my everyday makeup. But there are times when I really do want a pop of color. So I find myself reaching into this box for palettes like this Celestial Odyssey palette from Pat McGrath. There are 4 colors in here specifically that I think of a lot, and I will go into this box whenever I want to use them. But I also have this Natasha Denona Metropolis palette, and I will also reach into the box for this. But I even keep some of my favorite neutrals in here. For example, these YSL palettes that I depotted. The only reason I put this in this box was because the palette is just too large for any of my drawers. I might actually start storing these with my singles, but for now, this has just been easier. The rest of the items in here are all things I use for reference. For example, the Natasha Denona Golden palette. This was a great release, but I already have the original gold palette, which I personally like better. So it's nice to have this in case people ask me questions about it, but I don't necessarily need it cluttering my everyday makeup drawers when I'm always more likely to reach for the other one. The same goes for the Retro palette. I also have the original Lila palette that shares several of these shades. And I personally tend to reach for the Lila palette more often, so it just makes more sense for me to keep that one in my everyday makeup drawers and this one in my reference box. But this box has also become a kind of mechanism for me to start moving even more product out of my collection. There are products that I just wasn't quite ready to part with, but when I keep them separate from the rest of my collection, I can see how much I really want them or how useful they really are to me as a creator if they're in this separate space. For example, I think these 2 Huda Beauty palettes might just be on their way out. I haven't needed to reference either of them since creating the box, and I also haven't reached for them for my personal use either. So the Mercury Retrograde and the New Nude palettes might really be on their way out. Everything else in here has actually gotten a decent amount of usage though, so I'm actually really satisfied with the way this is going. Wow, you're still here! I honestly wasn't sure if anyone would still be watching. If you want to let me know that you got this far, leave me a flower emoji in the comments so I can be thankful for you. Now that you've seen everything, you might have noticed there are a couple of spaces here or there for individual new things, but for the most part, my containers are at their limit. They're completely full, which means by default, I'm going to be on a makeup low buy for the foreseeable future. It feels surprisingly nice. It means that I'm going to have to be extra discerning about any items I potentially bring into my collection, which means that hopefully they'll be an even better fit for me. I'll only have the best of the best. And that ends up fitting in perfectly with my adagio beauty or slow shopping concept. Now I just have a way to visualize that concept in the context of my containers. If this is the very first time you've ever heard me say the word adagio, then you might want to check out this video so that you can see what I mean. If you enjoy slow beauty content, please like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. But even if you don't, I hope you have a great week, and we can all remember that even stumbling can be a form of moving forward. So let's stumble in style.